but they're making them look better. Like that, the big house packaging, I think is really pretty cool. I'm sure you've seen these wine clubs that have the little vials. They follow me endlessly on social media, serving me ads all the time. I'm not sure what that says about me, but it's pretty neat. And the whole thing is like each of those is one glass of wine. So if you're gonna taste wines, it's just a novel format. And it looks pretty slick. And there's tons of companies doing these. I think it's called Vinebox is one of them. And then obviously the kegged wine, where you don't have any packaging, which brings up totally different challenges. You know, people are kind of doing the little tags. If you've ever been to First Draft in Rhino, it's an all self-service beer and cider. I think they have a few wines too. It's a pour your own. It's called First Draft, and you get a little card, and you go in and you pay by the ounce, and so you hold your little card up that's tied to your credit card, and put it up to the machine, and you pour whatever you want, and then it kind of meters it, keeps track of it. It's totally different, but it's packed a lot of the time. So some questions that I would, before contemplating whether you redesign your labels or how you design your labels, because this is so subjective, why do you want to change it? Like, that would be the first question that I would, if I were working with you, I'd ask you, like, why are you changing this? Like, what's wrong with it? Is it that consumers are getting back to you that they don't like it? Probably not. That doesn't happen very often. Consumers usually don't raise their hands unless you're intentionally doing something confrontational and complain about the way something looks. It's just not what they do. Unless you ask them, then they'll tell you. Industry feedback, like is your distributor or your buyers telling you that it needs to be changed? One thing that I've seen in the beer industry over the last 5 years, which may be relevant to the wine industry, maybe not yet, the rate at which the breweries change their labels has accelerated. It used to be like once every decade or longer that the breweries would like update their look. And now, with some of the people we're working with, it's like every 24 to 36 months, they're making major design overhaul changes to their systems. And I know with New Belgium, when they changed their packaging, they got a huge spike, and then it normalizes. But there is something to it. Consumers, especially in beer, are always looking for new. And the retailers, I think, are getting super bored. And so they're like, what have you done for me lately? You know, give me a new pack, give me something different. And the domestic beer guys have played this game forever, right? Coors Light is always testing some new packaging gimmick or trying a new vessel or something to try and get people's attention. But now craft beer is getting sucked into the same thing, where it's like, if you don't change it all the time, then you look old and stagnant. And the people that haven't changed it, like, we got a call recently from Sierra Nevada, who their stuff is so old school, but they're still selling millions of barrels of beer, so they're not doing anything wrong, but they feel so much pressure that they're gonna have to update their stuff because they haven't, and they're behind. And all the legacy guys are getting crushed. So in a year, you'll see something new from Sierra probably. So do you want to change perception, like that idea of, well, I want it to look more expensive than it is, so then I want to upgrade my labels? That might be a good strategy. Are you bored of your labels? We find that our clients get bored of their designs before anybody else, because they've seen it for the however many months of development, and then they look at it all the time, and we call it client fatigue. They get sick of whatever it is way before any consumer. So people change things just because they're sick of seeing it. may not be a great reason to change it, but it happens all the time, like literally all the time. I'm sick of this campaign. It hasn't even run yet. We're already on to the next one. So then I would ask, like, what's the story? Like, what's the inspiration behind your wine or your winery? Because that's where good ideas come from. In a perfect world, it's relevant to you, relevant to what you're doing, and your story and what your motivation is, especially if you're out selling this. Like, it has to connect with you. And so spending the time to really write out your story, why did you start this in the first place? What do these products mean? What's the significance of the names? Like, all that stuff is great information to give to whoever your designer is, because we're usually starting with a pretty clear slate. And we're like, all right, what are we gonna do? And with that stimulation from you guys is, here's my story, here's what's important to me, here's stuff that I love. Then one, we get excited about whatever the project is, and two, then we have stuff to work with. Otherwise, we're making it up, or we'll do our own research or whatever it is. But like, the more stories you have, usually those can translate, even if the consumer doesn't get it, like, oh, that's the story of, this that happened, it still could be the inspiration that leads to something cool. So what makes the product or your company unique or special? Who's your target buyer? Of all the things that I would focus on, after what your story is and why you're doing this in the first place, it's who do you want to buy this product? Like, what's that image? We do these persona exercises with bigger companies where we kind of make up the people that we think we're marketing to, or that we want to be marketing to. So if we're selling like $1 million condo in downtown Denver, one of these giant towers, we come up with these personas, like, who are these people? Well, it's the divorced cardiac surgeon who, is looking for these characteristics in a condo, and this is going to be the best place for them because it checks all the boxes of the ultimate convenience and blah, blah, blah. And we write these stories about these people. And then we look at them pretty regularly, and the salespeople look at them, and they're like, all right, when I see that guy walk in and they profile them, figure out that that's that guy that we wrote the story about, or that's the empty nesters where the kids went off to college and now they are done with college and now they have this money and they sold their company and now they want the penthouse. Those stories inspire us to do different things with our marketing, whether it's the sales materials that we produce or the way that it looks. Is we kind of keep those different groups in mind and try and figure out what they're gonna like. It's not about us. Like, if we were designing it, everything would look probably like that Underwood one, where it's so simple that no one can complain about anything. But maybe that cardiac surgeon guy wants something else. So more important that you guys like it. Second thing is, what is that buyer looking for? So if it's a younger demographic, like they said in the beginning, that's buying off the labels, that wants fun and bright colors and doesn't want to take themselves too seriously, then what do you do with that? What have you seen in the market that you like? This is a shortcut for us. So I give assignments out, especially when we're doing logos. I'm like, all right, find 10 logos that you like, that you think is relevant to you. Tell me why you like them. Or I'll give an assignment where I'll take 20 logos that we didn't design, and I'll create an assignment where I ask you to critique them. So what do you like about this one? What do you not like about it? What would you change? Is it relevant to you? Things that we have nothing to do with, that are a wide range. And then we get these, especially when there's a lot of people on the decision-making team, then we get all these kind of assignments back, and we could immediately see that we're screwed, because these two people like this, and these two people hate that, and these guys want that, and we have all these contradictions. So then we know, like, all right, we got to get way more clarity before we even start this assignment on what we're trying to accomplish, because the people on the review committee have completely different tastes. So the chances of this going well are really low. So look at what's out there. What style feels right for you? Modern, classic, casual, playful, sophisticated. All those can be really successful strategies. But which is the one that you want? Or which is the one that is relevant to your company or to your target buyer? The bonus is if all of those align, then the job gets a lot easier. And then what's your budget? And you could do a lot with a little. But if you love art and you want this beautiful, artistic, complicated label, well, someone has to draw that or paint it or whatever, and budget for that. It's easier said than done. And the pricing for that stuff varies. You couldn't believe, I'm sure the Ralph Steadman labels that he did, for Flying Dog, I don't even know what they paid him. They either paid him a lot or they paid him nothing, one or the other, because anything in between he probably wouldn't have done it. So, there's certainly ways to do it. There's tons of stock photos out there, stock illustrations out there that are really inexpensive that you can buy for $20. And if you lay it out right, it could look great. But it depends on what kind of approach you're taking. So back to the sort of subjectivity of this. The design of your brand is your preference. Like, you are going to approve something. We've designed, I don't even know how many things that never see the light of day because the decision makers didn't like it. Ultimately, they just decided they didn't like it. It wasn't some research study came back and said, 4 out of 5 consumers were confused by this over this. We've done some of those. It's usually pretty inconclusive when we've paid a lot of money to do research. So the first step is whatever gets in the world, you guys are approving, so you have to like it first, unless you're willing to just disconnect yourself from that process and let the designer run wild. So some strategies, and these are more, I think, different approaches that I see a lot. And I'll show you examples. A graphically distinct design, so something that makes it really easy to find and remember. That's a pretty good strategy, is if your stuff looks like everybody else's and you're walking down the aisle, the chances of people finding yours goes down. So how do you stand out? Now, if everybody's trying to stand out, that's the beer cooler. Everyone's trying to stand out, so it's a huge mess. But wine is almost as bad. An artistic approach, imagery, color, font, logos, all things you can play with. Production techniques, a unique shape, embossed foil, premium paper. I'd say the distilleries over the years have used production techniques the best. Look at vodka. Arguably all identical or relatively close, so they go nuts on packaging. And then when that doesn't work anymore, they go with displays, like how do you light up the bottle at the back of the bar, using LED lights to, they go nuts. They also have huge margins. So that combination of high margins and parity products is why I think the distilleries historically have had the coolest packaging and spend the most money on it. Interesting bottle shape, secondary packaging, cork, wax, all stuff you can do, and then create a system to strengthen your brand. So when we do the brewery guys, we try and come up with systems, because if they're going to do 20 beers a year or more, and we're constantly having to add new ones, we need to have a system in place to make that cost effective. If we're starting from scratch every time, then usually, especially the smaller guys, can't afford it. So we try and come up with a system where cranking out the next one is going to be relatively easy. And I've seen it a lot in wine too. So graphically distinct. Like it, hate it. These guys chose black and white and they're trying to own it. And even though they're all different, they're all kind of have that bold black and white look. A unique label shape or die cut. It looks pretty cool. A die cut is surprisingly inexpensive. You pay for it once, a couple $100 and you can get your custom shaped labels printed. Now getting it to work with your machinery might be a totally different challenge. Usually you'll see like the smaller batch ones that are hand applied versus the bigger ones where you got to have at least one smooth edge so you can line it up on your machine. So we deal with all those problems, but this one also has some sort of like UV raised ink on the label too, to kind of give it a little bit of dimensionality. Embossing and foiling, I saw some trend where it's like wine labels should look like wedding invitations. So I think this is sort of a good example of that, where, same thing with the die, getting an embossing die that punches the paper out, and then foiling at scale. Some are more reasonable than you think. Secondary packaging / gift worthiness. I think you're starting to see a lot more of this too, where it's like that extra thing that, if you look at champagne in particular, the packaging, the Veuve packaging, if you just want to see really cool stuff, Google Veuve gift packaging. You only see it in like airports, but there are these intricate cases and mailboxes and all kinds of stuff that they make, and it's all just part of the gifting. Now, I call these kind of elegantly simple. Not a lot of tricks other than just minimalist design. When everyone else is screaming, maybe an approach would be do something really, really simple. Still, I would say artfully done, but a lot of restraint, I think, went into this design approach. Ornately old-fashioned. This won some kind of design award too. It's just a really beautiful bottle that was modeled after some columns somewhere. Custom bottle molds, I think, if you have high enough volume, are doable. Otherwise, challenging. I don't know what in the beer industry, they go through a lot more bottles, so they, like New Belgium embosses all their bottles, and it adds an extra level of difficulty with sourcing and supply chain. But pretty simple, but they spent a lot on a custom bottle mold. So some other techniques, I really like the silkscreen and clear label approach too for more modern ones. I can't really tell on this one if it's a clear label or a silkscreen. Again, adds a lot of difficulty. The clear labels you need on the labeling machine, there has to be a different little piece that can read it, because otherwise it looks like there's no label. So I know on the beer lines, they have those. That grappa bottle, both a unique shape and a silk screen, which is pretty nice. This one, cool foil or wax or faux wax, I think it's plastic. But all kinds of tricks, techniques that, again, if you're trying to differentiate, something to consider. I think once you get into the economies of scale, then you can decide if it makes sense or not. Some interesting bottle shapes. Someone went nuts with the wax, but it's pretty cool. And this is what I mean by, I think, a pretty cool system that they're not commissioning illustrations, they're just shapes and colors. Yet, I think it's pretty powerful, graphically interesting, a little bit different, straightforward in some ways, but then unique in others. So it doesn't have to be, custom art. Like, this is shapes and colors, and still it works. It's pretty powerful. And then more the classic style, and I'll show you a couple things either, like Screaming Eagle, all the Wall Street guys talked about that wine, blah, blah, blah. It's not like the package is anything special. Like, It's that it stands for something else that has nothing to do with packaging. So there's plenty of examples where the packaging is completely irrelevant and it's something else that's driving the value, limited supply, reputation, Wall Street, whatever. So I found this, which I thought, at first I was like, this is kind of a funny joke. Here's kind of the instruction manual on how to design all these styles that I've been talking about. And I'm like, actually, this is pretty good. So I included all of them. So for the classically themed wine label, this is the textbook approach. You got your little illustration of a coat of arms or your building. There was one that I saw where you could take like any photo and with a Photoshop filter make it look like a dot drawing of, it made like a little shack look like a little villa. It's pretty funny. White pale background, font, the color, pretty classic looking. The fun and silly theme wine label. Satirical name, 1 or 2 colors, some kind of character, image or text. And again, kind of a joke, but kind of true. Like, this formula could actually work if you followed it to design any of these styles within reason. The modern one, I don't think you had to do asymmetrical design. Lots of negative space, bold colors, fonts. Old-timey themed. So, and like a lot of this stuff, you could totally buy as clip art and make it work if you were crafty enough. So there's something to this that isn't that far off. Like if you look through some of the examples, it's pretty spot on. The Mondavi one, it's pretty close. Like, not entirely, but the handwritten part, the illustration, the fonts, like, it's kind of a joke, but it's kind of true. So I left it in there just because. So then something like Prisoner. So is this a good wine label design? They have an interesting bottle shape, but not really. Like I think it's a premium bottle, but it's not. I think you could order this bottle if you wanted to pay the extra $1 or $2 or whatever it is for the glass. The label, it's printed on a nice stock. They got an illustration that actually, if you look at it, is pretty frightening. Of someone being tortured and put in captivity. They don't even tell you what kind of wine it is on the front. I know it's on the back with a little bit of a description, but not a whole lot. They have a custom typeface, the script that they commissioned. Then they also have their kind of corporate brand look that I think is on the back. So the question that I had was, is this a good wine label?
Someone pays $300 million for it, it is.
And I guess the question is, maybe it's good, but it doesn't even matter because people walk into the store and ask for it. And as an experiment, I've walked into some wine shops and say, do you have the Prisoner? And they go, oh. And they say, there's so many better wines here. Like, do you really want that wine? I'm like, all right, show me 5 other ones that you think are better than that one. And they always do. And they're usually cheaper. And so it's just that they've created this brand and have such successful distribution, and I would argue great marketing with influencers and all. I don't know how they did it, but people come in and ask for it. And, Chris in my office, who is not a knowledgeable wine guy, but he buys that wine all the time. And I make fun of him all the time. And I'm like, don't buy that wine. There's so many other wines that are better than that one that are less expensive, and he doesn't care. So for his 50th birthday, I bought him a magnum of it. Which, was harder than I thought to find, but I found one. So I guess at the end of the day, maybe it doesn't matter. But those are the exceptions, I think. The prisoner is sort of the anomalies that have defied gravity.
We got there.
I don't know. The label, I think, had a little bit of, confrontational style to it, especially at the time. But his other labels aren't, they tried the same playbook, but those other ones aren't nearly as popular. So I like some of the other ones too. I forgot which one it is. That's just the red, that old school like tape. Yeah, that has and that's all that's on there. I think it's cool, but I don't think they do nearly the volume that they do with the Prisoner. So it's kind of like Fat Tire and Prisoner. Some of these things, they just take off because they take off. And there's really no rational explanation for why. Every once in a while, one of those SKUs just blows up for no reason, and everybody buys it. And then the company sells it, and then you start over. So I apologize that I probably don't have any major conclusions for you on what makes a good wine label, but some places where you can look for inspiration, or at least of what designers primarily think are good wine labels. First, I would go to Target. And as I mentioned before, they curate wine labels there, probably more than wine. So from graphically interesting, kind of new school looking wine labels, spend some time at Target. And it's kind of, the one in Glendale, I think is the only one currently that has the Colorado liquor license. There's a lot of well-designed labels there at all price points. The Die Line, which is a graphic design kind of website, a lot of packaging. I would also encourage you to look outside of wine for inspiration. So there's a website, I didn't put it on here, called Oh Beautiful Beer, which is like every week is some beer package that's new and that the guy who runs the site likes it. That's the only criteria for being on there, is whether the curator of the blog likes it or not. Packaging of the World, Stranger and Strangers, that agency that I mentioned that's in New York and London, everything they do is just beautiful. Now, they're all different styles. They mainly, they do more than beer, than wine and spirits, but it's all alcohol packaging. It's just different categories, and their stuff is insanely beautiful. I'm sure they charge a fortune. CF Napa, if you just want to look at 100 wine labels in one place, they've done a ton. That's mainly what they do, is just crank out wine labels. And then Pinterest is probably the best place to look out of everywhere. If you just type in good wine packaging or best wine label designs, you'll instantly get hundreds of just interesting and unique wine labels. So good place to just look at pictures. I find myself spending hours going down these rabbit holes of different things, especially in Pinterest. But all these have really nice, if you just want to look at pretty labels, these are all good places to go check it out. There you go. My non-scientific, non-committal answer to Doug's question about wine label design. Do you guys have questions or confuse you, scare you?
Very informational. Good to see the diversity.
Yeah, the range is huge.
I think one point you were talking about is, labels for men, labels for women. There is a good stat out there that 70% of your wine buyers are female.
Yep.
So could direct your direction on that.
Well, it depends on where your wine's sold, though. Most wine is sold in grocery stores. So that's where most wine is bought. So if you're not in retail or grocery stores, if you're direct to consumer on your website,
And that's a classic stereotype that's probably mostly true.
It's just in the research today.
Yeah, no, I've seen that too. Yeah, the female shopper, you see that for everything, like household, the percentage of the household spending, And again, it depends. And the restaurant world is a whole nother one of like, didn't even tackle that. There's a fascinating study if you want to be depressed that Cornell did. Look up North Dakota wine study. And basically, they set up a restaurant for this experiment, or they had this wine list where it was the same wine, but they told the people that the wine was from North Dakota, or they told the people that the wine was from California, and then they had them both rate the wine and rate the food. And it was a free glass of wine. And the people that got the California one rated the food tasted better than the people that got the North Dakota wine. So it's all kinds of strange research out there that you can find. Yeah.
Did you run into anything about what millennials can afford or spend versus your baby boomers?
We've seen a lot just in different categories on millennial spending habits. Okay. And here's my conclusion, is it's bipolar. So they'll spend a lot of money on certain things that they care about, or certain lifestyle-y things, and food and beverage is pretty high on the list, along with rent. But then they can also be really cheap. So you see people, and I've seen it all the time, people walking out with like a 6-pack of PBR and then a 4-pack of like some outrageously expensive boutique beer. And they're buying both of them. So like I think it becomes very occasion-based. And I think everybody's like this, but maybe it's more dramatic. But it's like there's the PBR occasion where that's the perfect beer to have for that. And then there's the other occasion where it's like, I want to have the best thing that I can buy for $20 or whatever. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both for different occasions, is at least what I've witnessed the most. But yeah, it's a good question. But my gut is it's all the above. It's more occasion based and less about identifying with one or the other of a threshold.
And it seems like experience is a big factor these days. With all the tasting rooms and things like that, that's you develop your customer, not just grab them.
Yeah, there's no better marketing than hand-to-hand combat. It's getting someone. If you look at the food products, like all the natural foods, like the amount of sampling that they all do, like Whole Foods and Costco and all those places, why do they sample so much? Well, because people buy. It's like they overcome that number one barrier of having not tried it. So if you can get people to try your product, like the chances of you converting them into a sale is a lot higher. Granted, you see people at Costco that are just there grazing for lunch that are never going to buy whatever it is that they're sampling, but it must work or they wouldn't do it because it's expensive. It's a lot of effort. It's a ton of work to get people to try things. So, yeah.
Do millennials develop brand loyalty in the same way that baby boomers do?
It's a great question. I think there's a lot of studies on that too. I think it depends on the product category. I don't know for this. I know for beer, like no one's loyal to anything. So you try really hard, you win them over, and then 2 seconds later, the next thing is popular. But I think that's more of a state of the beer industry and less to do with the millennial behaviors. I don't know if anyone knows yet what's going to happen. I think there's so many products out there. Sometimes just finding something you had last time is like impossible. Like you liked it and it's gone. So I don't have a good answer for you, but I'm sure there'll be more research on it. Cool. Well, thanks.
I was going to also reiterate the thing Matt said early on, that it's probably, I think it is more important to make those connections, not just with the customers in your tasting room, but with the servers and the sommeliers in the restaurants with the employees in the liquor stores, because if they have a connection with you and your product, that does more than, spending $10,000 for every label. And it's much cheaper.
It's much harder though.
Well,
boots on the ground.
Costs time, and you're right,
Yeah.
it's harder. I mean, it's nice hiring a crack marketing firm, because you just say, hey, we're in good hands. I'll handle it.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Good luck. I'll leave a couple cards in case.